Benjamin Franklin once wrote that nothing in this world is certain except death and taxes.
A lot has happened since we sat in this recording studio last. And one thing that struck me really hard is that life is not a guarantee.
It's been said that we should dream as if we'll live forever and live as if we'll die today.
As I'm sure many of you did, our family watched the solemn memorial for Charlie Kirk, and we were greatly encouraged to see how the American people and how the American leaders responded in the face of this political assassination. Around this tragedy, there was a massive response, but there were no riots, and the focus was instead around Christian faith, family, and forgiveness. These are the values that unite a country. They're also the values that lead to wealth creation.
As I watched the memorial service for Charlie Kirk, I was impressed at how much he believed in dialogue versus dogma. Your way or the highway just doesn't work in our world. He believed that the best way to interact and find the truth was through discussion, not dictatorialism. And he was very, very much into discoursing with people that he disagreed with to try to bring out the truth. And those beliefs that Charlie held are true in all aspects of life, and especially in finances.
You know, it's interesting that the types of things that we tend to shy away from discussing in our country: politics, religion, money. Those are three things that people tend to shy away from talking. And maybe part of it is we don't necessarily know. We haven't necessarily studied these things and to be able to readily put them into words. But these things are very important to the way that we live our lives.
They are.
So if we talk about those more, it will force us to develop our thinking on the subjects better. And that leads to greater prosperity.
I'm surprised at how many people, when some political discussion comes up, says, well, I'm not political. It reminds me of when we lived in the Las Vegas Valley, how people would come to Las Vegas and tell us, well, I don't gamble. When I lose $20, I stop.
Yeah, you are gambling.
We are
you
political.
Just put a limit on it.
We live in a political world. We have to be political just to live in the United States because that's the form of government we have.
One of the things that's very important with having the dialogue too is you find out where you have common ground. Where can you agree?
Yes.
Otherwise, you just you write it off. You don't agree with that person about anything, and that doesn't lead to anything productive.
A lot of people too will say, well, I'm not religious. Well, you are a being, you are a spiritual being. Whether you practice a religion or not, you have thoughts and ideas that govern the way you act, and that becomes your religion. And just because you maybe don't wear a label of Christian or Catholic or Protestant or whatever it is, you are a religious person, and just not talking about it doesn't change the fact.
True.
You know, a lot of people, when they call us and talk to us, they're shocked that we don't just disparage having a 401k or an IRA. They think, well, wow, you're in infinite banking. Why do you still think that a 401k might be beneficial or an IRA might be beneficial to somebody? And the truth of the matter is that we are not dogmatic about infinite banking. It is part of financial. And if you incorporate infinite banking into your life, we believe that your 401k and IRA or your financial picture overall will be better, whether you have an IRA or a 401k or don't.
And the problem, with 401ks and IRAs is that's the mainstream advice today. That's where people tell you to start. But if you start there, you're going to limit a lot of your other options. If you start with infinite banking where you can still access and use your money, now those other things are still options. You can still do those later. In fact, I would argue some of those things are better done later in life than earlier in life.
And the dogma that the best way to save for your retirement is in an IRA or 401k eliminates people from seeing the full picture. And I hope that's what Wealth Talks here is doing for people, is to help you understand that there's a bigger picture out there. And if you're not involved in infinite banking and owning and participating in whole life insurance, you're missing out on a huge part of the financial sector that you could be benefiting from.
Many times here at Wealth Talks, we have talked about Dave Ramsey and what we don't agree with him because he's kind of like, my way or the highway, this is how you do it, and that's it. that's not the way we think. And today we've got an example of someone else who is either wise or maybe a loudmouth in the space. And so we're going to talk about Jim Cramer.
He's the host on CNBC's Mad Money program. Some people think he's a genius. He provides stock picks that you can pick to put in your portfolio and help everything go up, right? But some people say, well, he's just a loudmouth. And that's a big differentiation we have to make. There are bold people that can speak the truth boldly, and there are also people who are just loud. And because of their arrogance and their boldness, they get attention. It's true in the entertainment space. It's true in the financial space. So which one is Jim Cramer? Take a look at this clip.
Okay, Peter writes, should I be worried about Bear Stearns in terms of liquidity and get my money out of there? No, no, no. Bear Stearns is fine. Do not take your money out. This is really, look, if there's one takeaway other than a plus 400 somewhere, Bear Stearns is not in trouble. I mean, if anything, they're more likely to be taken over. Don't move your money from Bear. That's just being silly. Don't be silly.
Just 6 days later, here's what was being reported in the news.
Bear Stearns shares are down 90% this morning, and it's not just Bear. Pretty much every single bank is plunging in early trade this morning. This is a stock that recently was trading at 80. Last year was trading at 160. It is the fifth biggest bank on Wall Street. It is significant in that it is establishing a price for some of these hard-to-value securities, and as you are well aware, that price is pretty much zero.
I think every one of us has been involved in a conversation where the person that we're conversing with maybe is getting a little bit behind or not sharing the facts. And instead of sitting down and discussing, they just get louder and louder and louder and louder, so you can't put any input in, and they're going to be right regardless. They don't want to hear the facts.
It tends to happen.
And that's what I feel about a lot of talk show hosts, is that they just boldly claim something so dogmatically that you could never argue with them, and if you don't do it, you're just a fool.
Jim Cramer, he's recommending an average of about 20 stocks per show. He does a show 5 times a week. That's a lot of stock picks over time. If we look over a longer period of time, I found sources saying that over 5 years, he was recommending over 21,000 stock picks. Over 7 years, somebody else said he was hitting about 21,600. So it depends what time frame that you look at, how many stock picks he's recommending. Some of those stock picks are buy, some of them are sell. And with Bear Stearns, what happened is they had invested in a lot of the subprime mortgage-backed securities. Sometimes they weren't even the packaged mortgage securities themselves, but they had, what banks got into. They knew these types of investments were risky leading up to 2008. And so they started buying insurance on them. And then the insurance itself became packaged and sold as securities between banks. And so you had derivatives on top of the subprime debt. And so when that bubble came crashing down, it really came crashing down. And what ended up happening with Bear Stearns is to compound their problem. Not only did they have these investments, but they had also borrowed money at short-term interest rates to help finance some of it. And so it doubly hurt them. Their stock price went to $2 a share. That's where JP Morgan came in and offered to buy them out. The Federal Reserve ended up stepping in to help make that happen. And I think JP Morgan ended up buying them out about $10 a share. But it was with the help of the Federal Reserve they did that.
And the shareholders of Bear Stearns lost a lot of money.
They sure did.
I can't help but think of Warren Buffett, who says that you should never buy any stock until you thoroughly know everything about it. And I just don't think that Jim Cramer has the time or the energy or the team to look into 100 plus stocks a week and make an recommend. I know for sure he didn't do that as a hedge fund manager. He's probably concentrated really sincerely on the stocks that he really researched and did, because otherwise he wouldn't have been successful as a hedge fund manager.
Well, it's interesting. Wharton did a study from 2000 to 2017 on Jim Cramer's Action Alert Plus stocks. Now, 2000, that was before he was doing a show. So he had his own fund. When he started his show in 2005, that fund was converted to a charitable trust. You can still track the performance of it. Between 2000 and 2017, it returned 4.08% annually, which was far behind the S&P 500, which returned over 7% annually during that same time.
That's a 3% difference. That's huge.
Per year.
Yes.
And so it adds up to a lot more than that over that time. Something else, you have other studies, and something that makes it difficult to check the stock picks of any pundit that's on the internet or on television is how long are you holding this stock for?
The time factor again.
The time factor. Yeah. What is the window that you're looking at it? And when you're making this many stock pick recommendations, you're going to have some that are wrong. So let's say Bear Stearns was just a bad call on Jim Cramer's part. Well, what about the other calls that he makes? There's a CXO advisory study for looking at his picks from 2000 to 2009 that says he's right about 47% of the time. That's not even a 50-50 batting average. If the things he's right on are massive wins, then maybe they're offsetting those losses. But it can also be the other way around, and he's often wrong on his sell picks. I looked at a portfolio once that had a 77% success rate on the positions that they chose. But the amount of wins on those positions were low, while on the 20-some% losses, those tended to be larger losses dragged out over a longer period of time. So they dragged down the overall performance, and the portfolio was losing money. So even though it had a great success rate, it didn't have a good outcome rate. Yes. It didn't have a good real return. And so when we're thinking about stock picks like this, Jim Cramer's been wrong on a lot of sell recommendations too. He recommended selling Best Buy. He recommended selling Hewlett Packard near the end of 2012, and then those stocks shot up very shortly thereafter. Within the next 6 months, they had gains over 100%.
Well, at the risk of being catty, I brought my own study to the table. Back in 2013, there was a cat named Orlando.
Did you say a cat?
A cat.
A kitty cat?
A kitty cat named Orlando, that they decided they would have try this cat at stock picking. So they made this grid of different stocks and put it on the floor. And then they had Orlando the cat play with its favorite toy, and it would flip that toy onto this paper and this grid, and they would look at that stock and they would make that stock pick. This cat outperformed other stock pickers.
Wow.
And this is not just an isolated experience. So everyone go out and get a cat name and name it Orlando. They also did this study with monkeys throwing darts at a dartboard. And during this one particular time, the monkeys did better than the professional stock pickers. Now, that is not to put stock pickers down, but that is to open our eyes and say, oh, just because they're a stock picker doesn't mean that they have an insight to the future and that they're in on the know, because that doesn't mean that all their stock picks are going to turn out right or even do better than a cat playing with its toy.
You said something there that's really important. During that time period, the monkeys, or during that time period, Orlando the cat. Again, we're going back to this time factor. And, life is time. It takes over a period of time. And we need to understand that during certain times, the market is, your stocks might do very well, but that doesn't mean it's going to happen that way forever. And of course, that's why people like Dave Ramsey want you to get into mutual funds, which is a blend of stocks. But even then,
who's managing the fund?
Who's managing the fund?
There are several studies that look at active fund managers, which are fund managers who are trying to pick stocks to beat the market. So that you're in several in this mutual fund, but only 84 to 90%, some studies suggested more than 90% of these active fund managers did not beat the market over the period of time that they were investigated. And so what does that mean? Is all the professional research and the time that they spend, is it all a bunch of noise? It does raise an obvious question.
When we get back from the break, we're going to continue this discussion.
This is the Infinite Banking Made Simple binder. Everything you need to know about infinite banking in one spot, and it's a free download. Answers to the top commonly asked questions like what is infinite banking, how does it work, and how much does it cost to get started are answered right here. You'll find the step-by-step diagram starting on page 7 and the investment comparison on page 8. This Infinite Banking Made Simple binder is a free download. You can click the button to get your copy. At McPhee Insurance, we believe infinite banking has become too complicated and confusing, but it shouldn't be. And that's why we created this binder. Infinite banking is simple when you stick to the essentials and the facts, and the people who put it into practice get results. Don't let insurance terms like modified endowment contracts, 7-pay tests, direct recognition, and paid-up additions keep you from understanding infinite banking. Download the free binder and see how infinite banking can work for you.
The question obviously comes to the surface, John. Has Jim Cramer got better in his stock picks over the years?
Well, he made a pick, he said, to buy Silicon Valley Bank about a month before it failed. That was just in 2023, so I wouldn't say he's become better at this.
And that was a huge bank failure.
It was. Yeah, you had people starting to take money out of Silicon Bank, and they had a large holding of bonds that were paying relatively low interest rates. The Federal Reserve started raising interest rates, and that played havoc with the Silicon Valley Bank's bond holdings. They had to start selling them, even though they didn't want to. And when people started seeing them sell their holdings, they started withdrawing money from the bank, which just accelerated the whole deal. And it unwound pretty quickly.
It would be pretty hard for somebody to get better at predicting the market because the market constantly changes.
Yes.
There's different entities that enter the market. The events that happen, affect how the market behaves. The market is kind of a living thing.
Yeah.
Your sister, Anna, she is worked the local Saturday market over the summer. And she said the market this year was very different than last year. She would still sell out, hour or more before the market was over, but there was just kind of a different rhythm to the market.
People can get better at certain things, like Anna's better at baking. That's a skill she can develop. People can get better at financial calculations, but they can't necessarily get better at assimilating information and figuring out, financial information and reporting and figuring out, what's going to be the next hot item. And it's a well-known fact that specific advice applied to a general audience in the financial industry, that's the field of the charlatan. And that's what a lot of these financial entertainers do, is they're saying, do this, and they're telling it to a wide audience. You're going to have a lot of cases where that's not going to work out.
And in their dogma, they come across as this is fact and you're stupid to argue with it.
They sure
and
do.
That's the issue that we have with these figureheads that set themselves up as prophets of the future. Nobody knows what the market's going to trade tomorrow. Not even Jim Cramer or Dave Ramsey.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it's okay to have a good discussion on that.
Absolutely.
But so often these talk show hosts, they might have somebody on, but you're going to hear their dogma loud and clear over everything.
So here, I just want to talk about infinite banking because with infinite banking, we get a guaranteed growth. We get a chart showing us exactly what we will get when we pay our premiums. This is what you will get. This is guaranteed. Then they also show you what's not guaranteed. Oh, the company might have dividends, and we're going to share those dividends with you, and you could even have these values. But when we start using the guaranteed cash value that we have access to by borrowing the insurance company's money, then we can use it in our own financial picture and make things even better.
There's a couple of things that come to mind when we're talking about this, and one is the old story of Aesop's fables. The story of the tortoise and the hare. The hare was obviously a faster sprinter than the tortoise, but he laid down and took naps because the tortoise was so slow in their race that they were set up. And eventually, the tortoise crossed the finish line before the hare because the hare was taking a little siesta. This reminds me of when Jesse, my son, and I were at a meeting with one of a large insurance company here in the Midwest. And the chief financial officer was speaking, and I said, "Can I ask you a question? What do you personally invest in?" He says, "I don't have $18 billion to float the market. I buy participating whole life insurance and share in the profits of the insurance company." And I thought that was really good because insurance companies like this company, they don't invest in the stock market. They're investing in things that are a little bit more secure, and they can provide guarantees to their policyholders. And that is so important for us as we build a foundation around protection and guarantees rather than speculation or gambling.
It's hard to overestimate the value of having solid cash values that aren't going up and down with the market. And if you contrast this to the way that most people think about the stock market, many people invest in the stock market like they're playing a slot machine. And because they're treating it that way, what is it that I can buy that's going to make my fortune? That's why stock pickers are so enormously popular, regardless of which ones you follow, whether it's ones on the internet or whether it's talk show hosts like Jim Cramer on CNBC. They're treating it with that attitude. And when you have enough people treating the stock market with that attitude, it almost becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy that it's going to work out in that way. You pick something specific, you're going to have issues along the way.
It's setting up for a huge crash because today, many, many more lower income, middle income people are invested in the stock market because of 401ks and IRAs. And that means when that market crashes, which all markets do, they crash and correct, and this is historical knowledge. We just don't know when that's going to happen because we're not prophets of the future. Mm-hmm. There's going to be a lot of pain and agony financially throughout the entire population because, back in the 20s, it wasn't your common everyday Joe that was invested in the stock market. And that took us years to climb out of that as a nation. What's going to happen when the middle class and the working class and the lower income classes get hit by a market correction? And that's what the infinite banking concept was all about, is protecting ourselves from the unknown with guarantees that are going to be there regardless, as long as we commit to paying the premium that we promised to pay.
And with our whole life insurance cash values too, we have access to these cash values. And I think a lot of people underestimate the value of that. You could start a business. Do you know more people who have become rich by investing in the stock market or by owning a business?
Business owners by far.
They're creating wealth. They're having a direct influence in that. And yes, there's a lot of business owners that fail if they don't put the right, if they're not a good business person. So it's not for everyone. But by and large, a lot more people have become wealthy by owning businesses than by investing in the stock market.
Well, and my thoughts were kind of running to the same thing as I'm thinking about our policy owners when they are taking policy loans. Now, I don't always know what people are taking policy loans for. They don't always tell me. Some people do it directly with the insurance company, so I'm not even aware. A lot of people come to us, though, and ask for a policy loan. Sometimes they tell us what it's for, sometimes they don't. But I was thinking, I've never heard of any of our policy owners saying, yeah, I want to get a policy loan, I'm going to put it in the stock market. I've not heard of that.
We've had a few.
Okay, so you're aware of a few.
I'm aware of a few.
Okay, now But
usually they're thinking about it, at that point, they're thinking about the life insurance as an asset bucket. So they're not taking everything out of the life insurance policy to go put it in the stock market. Very rarely. I don't think I've heard of that.
Okay, but I have had clients that say, oh, I've got an investment opportunity.
Yes.
I want to do this. I want to start a business.
Yes.
Or I have something I want to get for my child. I'm going to do this, this education, or I'm going to buy an asset for them. I don't hear of, well, you've heard of a couple people who just want to go put it in the stock market, but by and large, they're thinking of how to get ahead financially, how to buy assets that are going to produce wealth.
Yes.
We also have clients that just want to transfer debt from some third party that they have, whether it's the tax man or whether it's credit card debt or whether it's some bad debt they've accumulated due to medical expenses. And they just want a lower interest rate and they want to recover the money they're paying back on that debt. And that makes a lot of sense, just to borrow from a life insurance policy and pay that creditor off and now just switch who you're paying that check to. Yeah. Write it back to the insurance company. It restores the balance that you borrowed. You get to use that money over again, plus you get a profit from the interest in the form of dividends that the company shares with you.
And one of our clients just the other day called, Travis. He said, I didn't want to buy a new car, but our family, needs to buy a new car. And you could tell it was kind of an urgent thing. He didn't anticipate to be in this position, but he gets to borrow from the life insurance company to purchase that car, which means he doesn't have to go through the financing with the car dealership. He gets to pay a much less interest rate. I think his interest rate was 4%, and he gets to recover the cost of the financing in his life. And if that money was in a 401k, that really wouldn't be an option for him.
If that money was in a 401k, people wouldn't be starting businesses. They wouldn't be doing a lot of things that they can do when they have that liquidity in their cash values.
That brings up the concept that many, many wealthy people have said this, but it's attributed to Warren Buffett, and that is when you're talking about money, there's two things that are most important, cash flow and liquidity. And investing in the stock market gives you neither. Investing in a 401k gives you neither. When we use our money to buy participating whole life insurance, it produces cash value, increases our ability to increase our cash flow because of the liquidity that is there.
And a lot of people, they look at the return on premiums paid to the cash value that accumulates in a life insurance policy. You might have a 3 to 5% return over a long period of time. That's nice and solid. You know, it's not going up and down. It's not the main focus. It's how are you going to use that money? And there's also value in having the death benefit. You know, because if something happened to you, life insurance is going to be one of the best investments that you can make. You might have a return of 15% on if you look at the death benefit side.
Which brings us right back to dreaming like you're going to live forever and living like you're going to die today.
You know, when we dialogue about people like Dave Ramsey and Jim Cramer and others that clients have asked us to speak about on this podcast, we're not trying to denigrate them as individuals. We just want to make sure that our audience understands that there's a risk involved when you're investing. The risk is that you could end up poor instead of being richer. But you know, life itself is a risk. The more protection we can have against risk in life gives us more control. And when we're talking about finances, that's very important because the more you control your money and can have it flow under your control so it returns to you, the more you're going to be able to generate, and the more of what you generate, you're going to be able to keep. And that's what infinite banking is really all about. It's not about an either-or concept. We have lots of clients that use their money to invest in their business, to invest in stocks, like John said, or to do other things that enhance their life. So it's not an either-or concept like these talking heads want to make it be. Infinite banking is not an investment. It's a way of life.
Watching the leaders of our country advocating for a greater expression of our faith and family values and the value of free speech and discussion in our country was very refreshing at the Charlie Kirk Memorial Service. There are all sorts of lies and half-truths in the world, and the financial sector is no different. Discussion and debate helps to reveal the truth.
Infinite banking gives you more control over the use of your money. It allows you to get guaranteed growth on your money while you borrow the insurance company's money to recover the cost of financing and investing.
Next week, we're going to talk about what Kevin O'Leary says is more expensive than failure, right here on Wealth Talks.